Welcome to The Author Show, where we feature new authors and books, from fiction to self-help and everything in between. You'll find it all at theauthorshow.com. That's theauthorshow.com. And now let the show begin.
Hi, this is The Author Show, and I'm your host, Linda Thompson. Elizabeth Jennings broke racial barriers a century before Rosa Parks. In his book, America's First Freedom Rider, Elizabeth Jennings, Chester A. Arthur, and the Early Fight for Civil Rights, author Jerry Mikorenda tells Elizabeth's story. And he joins us today to share more. Jerry, welcome to The Author Show.
Hi, Linda. Thanks for having me.
Jerry, will you please give us a quick overview of America's First Freedom Rider?
Well, the central part of the story is Elizabeth gets thrown off a horse car in 1854, and instead of just walking away from the incident, she decides to fight it in court. And when I first started researching this, the question I always asked myself is, why did she try to get back on that car when she was thrown off? And to answer that question, it took me 12 years, a lot of research, to find out that it really came down to what Frederick Douglass said when he wrote about her court victory, is that she came from good New York stock. So to me, it's really a family story, and the family happens to be African-American abolitionists and activists for civil rights at a time when it was fairly unheard of that middle-class people would do that. And again, I think her gumption, if you will, comes from her parents. On her father's side, he's the first African-American to receive a U.S. patent. He invents a forerunner of today's dry cleaning. He was a tailor, an abolitionist. Her mother was an early feminist. She gets involved in these what they call literary societies back in the 1830s, which raised money for anti-slavery movements. But also it was women teaching other women how to read and write because they couldn't go to school.
How did you first learn of Elizabeth Jennings?
Well, I think like a lot of writers, when you're researching in one subject, it kind of spurs ideas for others. So I was researching something for one book that I was contemplating writing, and I came across this fact, and I was very startled because I thought I knew a lot about local history, and it turns out that I didn't, and I was like, whoa, what's this all about? And finally, when we came around, I was talking to my agent, and I said, what should we try next? And she said, well, you got this story. Why don't you see where it goes? And I remember very distinctly, it was on a President's Day. It was very snowy. There was really not much to do. And I remember telling my wife, well, I'm going to follow this until I hit a dead end. And as I said earlier, lo and behold, 12 years, I kept researching and the story kept getting better. So it finally convalesced into a book.
Jerry, did you write America's First Freedom Rider while picturing any sort of reader?
Well, I think the book is mostly written for regular folks who are interested in U.S. history. And within that, there are several smaller groups. So, for instance, if you're interested in U.S. presidents, a lot of histories show them interacting with other heads of state. My book shows them interacting with regular people, and I focused on, for instance, Chester A. Arthur's younger years in life. And again, with other areas I found, civil rights law is something that people are interested in my book, how that came about. African-American history, transportation history is in there, as well as women's rights and a lot of New York City history.
You've written a lot of articles and op-eds, but I believe this is your first book. How would you describe your writing style?
Well, I like to connect readers to people and events and show connections between history. I mean, to me, the whole point of studying history is to see how does it connect to today and who does it connect through. So I try to show how sometimes minor characters throughout my book kind of feed up into the larger events that are occurring in the 1850s and during the Civil War and whatnot. And then people can really, for themselves, see how it connects to our time.
In your opinion, why do we know so much about Rosa Parks and very little of Elizabeth Jennings?
Well, a lot has to do with technology. I mean, I think the iconic moment for Rosa Parks is the photo that is taken of her sitting on the bus. There was the beginnings of photography in the 1850s, but certainly not enough for somebody to have captured the incident on film. And there wasn't any mass media. There certainly wasn't TV or radio. Really newspapers are really just starting to come into their own at that time period. And there's also other things with her. A lot of her family dies off, so they weren't able to carry the story into our now media-rich time, and just basically tragedies of history.
I didn't realize that discrimination was practiced on New York public transportation. How widespread was this sort of discrimination in the northern states?
Oh, it was all over the U.S. in Boston, Philadelphia, New York, all the major cities, when they started omnibus and horse car lines, all said, that, as the signs were called, it said no colored allowed in this car. Some line cars for African Americans only. Some said, well, they could ride on the back, but it was discrimination, and to the point where if a conductor said, I'm not going to let you on, I mean, that means that person doesn't get to work. So it really affected the way people lived their lives and the jobs that they could have.
Wow. So tell me, what happened to Elizabeth after she was assaulted by the conductor and the police?
Well, somehow she makes it home, in which in days where you have kidnappers who, if you read or saw the movie 12 Years a Slave, when people were just pulled off the streets and sold into slavery, her making it home by herself was a minor miracle. She makes it home. She's battered. She's able to write a letter that her father takes to the church she was supposed to sing at and lead the choir on the Monday after. And as a group, they said, well, what are we going to do? And the packed house says, well, we want this railroad to finally pay for what they did, to own up to their mistakes. Also, we have a right to ride, and we're tired of not being able to ride. And the third thing is they wanted to make them pay for it in court, which was not a done deal. So her father went out and hired Cover and Parker, the best civil rights law firm in the country. And they said, well, we have a new guy, just graduated from law school, Chester Arthur. He'll be your attorney.
Wow. So this was quite some time before Chester A. Arthur ever even considered running for the presidency. Was he a successful attorney for Elizabeth?
Yes, well, he wins the lawsuit, and I think had some brilliant strokes. First of all, the court systems had changed a few years before in New York, and they went to a Supreme Court system. So you go to any district in the state and bring a case up there. The Third Avenue Railroad is headquartered in Manhattan. So he moves the venue over to Brooklyn, to the Second District Court in what is now Borough Hall. At the time, that was Brooklyn City Hall. So he kind of takes the home field advantage away from the railroad, and I think catches them by surprise, because they come in and they plead no contest that their employees, they had no control over them because free will is a big thing. And they said, basically, we have nothing to do with the way they did things. And Arthur turns around, he finds a statute from 1824 on the state books that says that, yeah, you actually are liable for the things that your employees do while they're working for you.
So what do you think caused Elizabeth to defy convention and board that horse cart?
I think it's the upbringing of her family. It was her father's determination and activism. I mentioned earlier that he invented and got a patent for dry cleaning. Well, there was another tailor in the city in the 1820s who tried to steal the invention from him and put out a lot of ads, had a lot of money behind him, and said that, yeah, this is mine. And he sued him. He brought him to court, sued, and went before an all-white jury. He held up his letters of patent that John Quincy Adams signed and said, I own this, and the jury found for him. They gave him $50, which was a lot of money in 1821, and he won his lawsuit. Her mother was part of these feminist groups that went out and got petitions against slavery. So many were given out by these groups in the 1830s that Congress disallowed them and said no more petitions against slavery. So she had that background. Also, her brothers and sisters were activists that said, I'm not going to be disrespected, and this is my right, and you have no right to take it away from me.
Boy, I understand that one. So, Jerry, have you always been interested in little-known historical figures?
Actually, I have, yeah. I'm always wondering about, what the little guy is doing when the king passes by on his horse and all that. Even following baseball history, I'm like, I want to know what's the little guy doing? Who's the bat boy? And for whatever reason, that's the kind of thing that I've been following. And I think, there's a lot to be said for these folks who are just, as Douglas says, the unheralded heroes.
Absolutely. So are you writing another book now?
I'm not writing another nonfiction right now, but that could change. Next year, I have a novel coming out, which is I'm really psyched about.
Jerry, would you please read for us a short excerpt from America's First Freedom Rider?
Sure. I was thinking, in terms of giving people a good feel for what the book is about, I would take a part out of the ending of my preface. Elizabeth Jennings' saga spans the breadth of American history from the Revolution to today. The entire Jennings family used their skills to end slavery's grip upon this nation. That grip couldn't have been stronger than it was in the 1850s. The Dred Scott decision, Roberts v. Boston, the Fugitive Slave Act, all painted a bleak picture for African Americans hoping to obtain their natural right to equal citizenship. The young attorney who defended Elizabeth, Chester A. Arthur, would become the 21st President of the United States. His fame brought a renewed interest in Jennings' old lawsuit. Unfortunately, rather than show how far the United States had come in its race relations, it illustrated just how far the country had fallen. Arthur and Jennings' lives paralleled and intertwined over the years before and after the trial that bound them together. The result holds a mirror to the norms of society that to this day values race and gender over all other attributes. Despite being born into poverty, Arthur rose to the highest office in the land. As a female of color, Jennings had to fight every day for some semblance of human rights. America's first freedom rider, Elizabeth Jennings, Chester A. Arthur, in the early fight for civil rights, brings together the cultural and historical events surrounding her life. It places national issues in the context of her time, her family, her story. It's an age not unlike our own, fraught with racism, partisan politics, and the struggles for marginalized groups to gain equal status. In an 1859 newspaper tribute that marked the passing of Elizabeth's father, Frederick Douglass wrote, "He was not an exception, but a representative of his class whose noble sacrifices and unheralded labors are too little known to the public." This book is a total of many efforts over the years to bring those labors into proper focus as part of the American diorama, ragged edges and all.
Wow. So what would you like readers to most remember about America's first freedom rider?
I think the lesson or the thing to remember is that average people can have an impact on history. That by living their normal lives and just wanting normal things, they can accomplish, in the end, great things.
That's a great message. Tell me, where can we learn more about you, and where can we purchase America's first freedom rider, Elizabeth Jennings, Chester A. Arthur, and the early fight for civil rights? You
can learn more about me at jerrymikorenda.com. That's JerryMikorenda.com. And the book is available on all the major online venues. It's also available in most bookstores that carry Rowan, Littlefield, Alliance Books. If you Google my name, a lot of different places come up that sells the book.
We've been talking with Jerry Mikorenda, author of America's First Freedom Rider. Jerry, I'm a history buff and will admit I knew nothing about Elizabeth Jennings. Thank you for enlightening me and our listeners about this important piece of history. I do hope you'll come back again and talk to us when you release your next book.
Thank you for having me. It was a great time.
While not wealthy, Elizabeth Jennings was not the poorest of the poor. She came from a family of inventors and business people who stood up for what was right without drawing much attention to themselves. For Elizabeth to become America's first freedom rider is amazing in itself, but to think that a future president would defend her is breathtaking. If you're as interested in this story as I am, please go to JerryMikorenda.com and pick up your copy of Jerry's book today. Please share this interview with your friends so that they too may become acquainted with our author. And remember that The Author Show may be accessed at any time at theauthorshow.com. Plus, selected interviews can also be found on major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and many more. Whether you're an author who would like to be featured or a reader in search of new books, theauthorshow.com is a great place to start.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. Find out more about authors and their work at theauthorshow.com. Theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.